What if I told you that the supposedly impenetrable fortress of the Russian military is actively crumbling in a location? No one expected to break this fast. The war in Ukraine has just hit a shocking tipping point, triggering a chain reaction that could rewrite the entire geopolitical chessboard. You have likely heard the political declarations, the promises that the war began in Crimea and will end there. But those are no longer just words. They are manifesting into a brutal, undeniable reality right now. Welcome to this urgent deep dive, where we uncover the hidden truths of global affairs. Let us break this down step by step. For months, the world's attention has been pulled in a dozen different directions. But right now, a massive, coordinated offensive is tearing through the southern front in Zaporizhia. This is not just a localized skirmish. This is a total counterattack, a wildfire of military strategy that is rapidly spreading beyond the border and seeping deep into Russian territory. To understand the gravity of this moment, we have to look at the 0 point of this shocking chain reaction. We have to go to where this new chapter began. Over the past 2 weeks, Ukrainian armed forces have systematically dismantled Russian defensive lines in the Zaporizhia region, liberating dozens of villages. Each fallen settlement is another card pulled from the Russian military's house of cards on the southern front. I have been closely analyzing the movements northwest of Verbov. The reduction of Russian pressure in areas like Stepov was not just a lucky break. It was a calculated, masterfully executed strike that essentially picked the lock on the entire Zaporizhia front. This breakthrough did not happen in a vacuum. It followed the liberation of crucial settlements in the direction of Oleksandrivka. As Ukrainian forces pushed relentlessly towards Verbov, they initiated fierce clashes for the village of Kalinivsky. And this is not just empty propaganda. This momentum has been completely corroborated by independent analysts, satellite imagery, and geolocated frontline footage. The blue zones on the tactical maps are expanding daily, swallowing up Verbov, Kopani, and Novoprokopivka. If you are wondering why this specific advance is so devastating to Moscow, you have to understand the geography of the Russian occupation. The Zaporizhia region is the critical land bridge connecting mainland Russia to the occupied Crimean Peninsula. Severing this artery has always been the ultimate prize for Kyiv. By shattering these defenses, often referred to as the formidable Surovikin line, Ukraine is effectively threatening to slice the Russian army in half. Now, think back to the shocking 2024 Kursk operation, where Ukrainian forces crossed the border and seized hundreds of square kilometers of sovereign Russian territory in a matter of days. What we are witnessing right now in southern Ukraine is the exact same tactical blueprint being unleashed. The Russian command is experiencing a violent case of déjà vu. So, how exactly is Kyiv pulling off this seemingly impossible feat? The answer lies in their elite forces and a radical shift in operational tempo. The advance stretching from Zaporizhia toward Pokrovsk is a concrete demonstration of tactical mastery. The Ukrainian army has reestablished control in critical border areas between the Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions. They have meticulously cleared out Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups. The gray zones, those bloody contested strips of no man's land, are shrinking rapidly. Russian forces have been violently pushed back on this dual front. The spearhead of this crushing blow is made up of Ukraine's absolute best, specifically the elite air assault forces. These are the units designed for high-risk, high-reward operations. General Ola Apostol, the commander of these air assault forces, has deployed legendary units like the 82nd Bukovina and the 95th Polizer Brigades. Their primary objective is ruthless and clear: the complete elimination of Russian strike groups and their absolute expulsion beyond the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. I have tracked their movements, and despite intense Russian resistance and the chaotic deployment of emergency reserves, these Ukrainian paratroopers are maintaining a terrifyingly high operational tempo. The battlefield right now is highly dynamic, a relentless meat grinder where Ukrainian units are successfully absorbing and repelling Russian counterattacks while still moving forward. This is the definition of operational momentum. Russian forces are now feeling the crushing pressure in a vital strategic corridor that begins in Zaporizhia, cuts through Orikhiv, and extends all the way to the Pokrovsk logistical hub. Let me give you a concrete example of how completely outmatched the Russian logistical strategy has become. Just recently, the Ukrainian Spartan Brigade executed a flawless ambush on a Russian military convoy. The Russians, desperate and short on specialized equipment, have been experimenting with bizarre homemade modifications, welding armor onto civilian pickup trucks and all-terrain vehicles. This convoy was rolling through the occupied Zaporizhia Oblast, trying to reinforce the Pokrovsk direction. The Spartan Brigade caught them dead to rights on the open road. That entire Russian metal block was turned into a graveyard of twisted steel before it ever reached its destination. This is not just about destroying a few trucks. It is about strangling the logistical routes the Russian army desperately needs for its southern offensives. But here is the most staggering part. These frontline advances are only the tip of the iceberg. When you look at the deep strike operations conducted by Ukraine's SBU Alpha Special Forces, the numbers are absolutely jaw-dropping. In just one recent week, alongside the massive loss of territory, the Russian military hemorrhage included tanks, armored vehicles, advanced artillery systems, multiple rocket launchers, and critical air defense systems. We are talking about the systematic eradication of their electronic warfare capabilities, hundreds of transport vehicles, drones, robotic systems, and vital ammunition and fuel depots. This is not just a retreat. It is a systematic dismantling of the Russian war machine in the south. The fire of freedom that started in Zaporizhia has ignited a total inferno, but this operation is not contained to the south. The shockwaves are already hitting other fronts, hundreds of kilometers away, creating a nightmare scenario for the Kremlin. If you thought the southern front was a disaster for Moscow, wait until you see what is unfolding nearly 300 kilometers away. While the world's eyes were fixed on Zaporizhia, the Ukrainian military unleashed a phantom offensive along the Kupiansk to Kharkiv line. In my analysis of the battlefield dynamics, this is a classic pincer strategy, stretching the Russian military's already fracturing resources to their absolute breaking point. Moving towards Vovchansk, Ukrainian forces did not just recapture the settlement of Piln. Advancing under the natural cover of the Seversky Donets River, they executed a tactical masterclass. They managed to completely isolate and then obliterate an entire Russian battalion. Imagine a steel trap snapping shut. That is exactly what happened here. This northern operation was a direct mirror of the southern successes, proving that the Ukrainian command is orchestrating a synchronized, multi-front symphony of destruction. The situation in Kupiansk right now is nothing short of a catastrophe for the Russian forces. From the intelligence I have gathered, the percentage of territory remaining under Russian control in that immediate sector has plummeted to less than 3%. Picture this. Only a few dozen exhausted soldiers are currently sheltering in the last remaining pulverized buildings. They are not fighting a war anymore. They are just trying to survive the night. Trapped north and east of Kupiansk, pinned against the Oskil River, they are completely cut off from rescue. Russian commanders continue throwing men into the meat grinder in desperate attempts to advance, but every push ends in failure. While they cling to parts of Vovchansk, the Ukrainian 116th Independent Mechanized Brigade is systematically dismantling their mobility. They are hunting down Russian armor, all-terrain vehicles, and mortar positions with ruthless efficiency. The Russian army is rapidly bleeding out its fire support and its ability to maneuver. But let me show you where the real vulnerability of the Russian army in the northeast is hiding. It is in their blind spots. Drone operators from the Heart Brigade recently pulled off an attack that belongs in a modern military textbook. They targeted a heavily concealed Russian ammunition depot in the Vovchansk direction. These depots are the lifeblood of the Russian artillery. They build them hidden in dense forests or tucked away in rural village structures, thinking they are invisible, but they are not. A Ukrainian drone literally flew straight through the window of the facility. The resulting explosion was massive. The Ukrainian armed forces have perfected these genius pinpoint attacks, turning the very environment against the occupying forces. This absolute control over a 300-kilometer expanse proves that Ukraine is not just winning tactical skirmishes, they are reshaping the entire strategic landscape. And that brings us to the beating heart of this conflict, the Donbass. These recent operations are not just about pushing lines on a map. They herald a much broader, uncompromising strategic goal. President Zelensky made it crystal clear in his security addresses in Munich: Ukraine will never abandon the Donbass. He reminded the world that this war did not start. a few years ago. It began in 2014, bleeding from the east and from Crimea. And this unwavering determination is now being backed by devastating, unprecedented firepower. Consider the precision strikes happening right under the nose of Russian command. Just 1 kilometer from the occupied city of Donetsk, a Russian-made Tor air defense antenna was actively scanning the skies. Its sole purpose was to block Ukrainian drones. But in a twist of profound irony, Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles hunted it down and blew it to pieces. The hunter became the hunted. Then, the night of February 22nd brought absolute hell to Russian strongholds. 2 critical Russian defense installations near Donetsk and Mariupol were wiped off the map, but the real masterstroke happened in Luhansk. An enormous oil depot, the vital artery supplying fuel to Russia's 41st and 20th Combined Arms Armies, was set ablaze. At dawn, the sky was still black, with a massive column of smoke from chain explosion. This attack, carried out with swarms of FPV, kamikaze drones, virtually severed the fuel logistics for the entire Russian eastern grouping. We are talking about millions of dollars instantly turning to ash. You have to understand the sheer scale of this logistical nightmare for Moscow. The modern battlefield consumes astronomical amounts of diesel. When a depot holding thousands of tons of fuel detonates, the ripple effects paralyze operations for weeks. Without fuel, Russian tank units are just sitting ducks. Armored vehicles become multi-ton coffins. Artillery units lose the ability to shift positions and provide continuous fire support. The Ukrainian defense forces are not merely defending their soil. They are actively severing the jugular vein of the Russian war machine. This shift in momentum is historic. For nearly a decade, the Donbas region has been a fortress of Russian proxy control. The trenches there are deep, the minefields are vast, and the propaganda has been relentless. But the invincibility of the Russian lines is a myth that is finally shattering. I have observed a distinct panic in the communications of Russian military bloggers and insiders. They are watching their state-of-the-art electronic warfare systems fail against cheap, commercially modified drones strapped with explosives. This is the asymmetric warfare advantage that Kyiv has mastered. They are trading a $500 drone for a multi-million-dollar air defense system, and they are making that trade every single day. The financial bleed on the Russian Federation is catastrophic, but the tactical bleed is even worse. Every destroyed Tor system opens a corridor in the sky. Every shattered fuel depot grounds a battalion of tanks. This is a methodical, calculated dismantling of an empire's military might. And while the Russian forces are bleeding out in the east and the south, Ukraine has been quietly preparing its most audacious strategy yet. A strategy that does not just push the Russians back, but brings the terror of the front line directly to the doorsteps of the Russian elite. The borders are no longer a shield for Vladimir Putin's military-industrial complex. The war has evolved, and it has broken containment. But the most terrifying development for Vladimir Putin is not happening on the front lines. It is happening deep inside Russian territory. We are witnessing the most ambitious and devastating cross-border operations since the dawn of this conflict. Ukraine's operational capabilities have officially shattered the illusion of a safe Russian homeland. Let me break down the sheer scale of this escalation. I am tracking the deployment of Ukraine's newly produced Flamingo cruise missiles. These are not just tactical weapons. They are strategic game changers carrying warheads weighing over a ton. Recently, we witnessed the longest-range cruise missile strike to date. Ukrainian forces sent these missiles flying over 1,400 kilometers to strike the Votkinsk factory. Why Votkinsk? Because this facility is the beating heart of the Russian military-industrial complex. It is a crown jewel that produces the very missiles Russia uses to terrorize Ukrainian cities. They manufacture the Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles, the Topol-M intercontinental ballistic missiles, and supposedly the infamous Oreshnik systems. We all know the Oreshnik is touted as Putin's ultimate doomsday weapon. Satellite intelligence showed the Russians dug extensive trenches and erected massive fences around the plant. They knew it was a high-value target. But those defenses were completely useless against the Flamingo. From what I have gathered through military intelligence and expert analysis, this strike proves Ukraine is rapidly scaling up its domestic production of high-tech, long-range weaponry. They are bypassing Russian radar signatures and outsmarting advanced guidance jammers. And Votkinsk was not an isolated incident. The massive Grau ammunition depot near Kotlebane in the Volgograd region was also obliterated. This was a central hub for complex missile storage. The strike wiped out thousands of square meters of vital explosive reserves in the blink of an eye. The cross-border punishment does not stop with cruise missiles. Ukraine is using kamikaze drone swarms to systematically blind and paralyze Russian logistics. Look at the recent attack on the Pugachovka airfield in the Ural region. Ukrainian long-range drones slipped past air defenses and destroyed a Mi-8 transport helicopter and a Ka-52 attack helicopter. This directly crippled the occupiers' air logistics and rapid response capabilities in that entire sector. Simultaneously, massive operations are targeting the very infrastructure that keeps Russia running. The Frunzenskaya electrical substation in Belgorod was hit, plunging surrounding settlements and the city itself into darkness. Russian air defense systems fired frantically, but the swarm overwhelmed them. Meanwhile, in the Tver region, a critical chemical plant producing specialized plastic lubricants for the Russian Ministry of Defense was struck. We are seeing satellite imagery confirming that their core production workshops are in absolute ruins. But all of this pales in comparison to the psychological and logistical blow dealt to the Russian capital. Ukraine launched a staggering swarm of approximately 100 unmanned aerial vehicles directly at Moscow. The Kremlin was forced into a state of absolute panic. A covert emergency protocol was activated, and every major airport in the city, Vnukovo, Domodedovo, Sheremetyevo, and Zhukovsky, was forced to completely suspend operations. Flights were diverted, the skies were closed, and the capital of a global superpower was essentially blindfolded and grounded by cheap, lethal drones. This is not a one-off event. It is a calculated pattern. Similar mass drone strikes paralyzed Moscow's airspace earlier this year, proving that Ukraine's capacity to bypass Russian air defense and choke the capital is not just persistent, it is growing. When you pull back and look at the entire geopolitical chessboard, the recent performance of the Ukrainian armed forces points to a historic turning point. The view from the Kremlin towers is now one of absolute dread. I see a shameful, collapsing front in the south, where 300 square kilometers have been surrendered. I see desperate, starving troops trapped in pulverized buildings in the north. I see highly protected ballistic missile factories burning deep inside the Russian motherland. And I see a capital city forced into a blind panic, completely shutting down its own skies. All of this data points to one undeniable truth. The next move is going to be devastating. What remains shrouded in secrecy is exactly how Ukraine will deploy its final strategic reserves, and what new, highly classified military plans are currently being drawn up in the secure corridors of NATO. The dominoes are falling, and the coming days could permanently break the back of the Russian military machine. What do you think? Is this the final tipping point that forces a collapse, or are we staring down the barrel of an unprecedented global escalation? Drop your raw take in the comments right now. If this deep dive woke you up to the reality on the ground, smash that like button and make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on, because this situation is moving fast and you need to stay ahead of the curve.